In the early 1920s, few communities in the United States had as clear a vision of what they wanted to be as Santa Barbara. The influential civic group the Plans and Planting Committee, led by leaders like Bernhard Hoffman and Pearl Chase, believed creating a specific image of the city would be a boon, attracting tourists, businesses, and industry alike. The architectural style they chose to represent that image was Spanish colonial revival.
Santa Barbara was developing a reputation as a tourist destination. There was an important book written by an author named Charles Nordhoff who extolled Santa Barbara's charm, and a big part of that charm was the city's look, the adobe buildings, the mission, etc. Then statewide, you had a movement that began in the 1890s to preserve the California missions, some of which were falling into disrepair. And another important aspect of this was the 1915 Panama, California Exposition in San Diego, which really popularized the Spanish colonial style of architecture.
At that time, architecture in Santa Barbara was anything but unified.
Well, it was really a potpourri of styles. I mean, one, of course, you had a handful of old adobes from the Spanish and Mexican era. You had the variety of Victorian styles, Italianate, Eastlake, Queen Anne, etc.
But the Plans and Planting Committee wanted more than a ceremonial designation of Spanish colonial revival as the architectural style for the city. They wanted the city to codify it and require it for all new construction downtown. In response to the community's desire for stronger development controls, in 1923 the City Council created the Planning Commission.
The public wanted a more organized city planning, more institutional city planning aspect, not just private citizens getting involved, but having a government involvement as well.
Less than 2 years later, Mother Nature intervened, rocking the city with a 6.3 magnitude earthquake. The quake literally changed the face of Santa Barbara while at the same time provided an opportunity few could have previously imagined.
Well, the 25 earthquake in some ways gave city leaders a clean slate. A lot of buildings obviously were damaged, some destroyed, and it really gave, even though there was already a movement toward giving the city a unified look, it certainly allowed for an acceleration of that process.
After the quake, with the guidance of the City Council and help of civic groups, the Planning Commission began shepherding a process of urban image making that continues to this day.
From early on, the values of what's important here, a sense of place, a good place to raise a family, a good place to be engaged in cultural and entertainment, civic engagement in the community, all of these planning goals and ethics of the community have been established and just carried forward. So what we have all done, the Planning Commission over these 90 years, is really just carrying forward and these central values of the community.
The Planning Commission is an advisory body to the City Council. It also acts as a deciding body on a wide variety of subjects, including subdivisions, land use modifications, conditional use permits, coastal development permits, and certain public projects. The Commission's guides throughout the process are the zoning ordinance and the general plan.
Their basic function is development of the city's general plan and zoning ordinance, the required documents that the state of California requires that the city prepare and keep up to date. And that's the Planning Commission's preliminary responsibility. In terms of their day-to-day time, it's mostly spent reviewing individual projects.
Essentially, we're a watchdog for Santa Barbara to make sure that the plans that are in place, and there are many of them, you know, housing and noise and traffic and all this, that all these are within what the city has voted on to be what their future is.
The Planning Commission's purview ranges from the general to the specific. At any given meeting, the Commission could be crafting amendments to the general plan or deciding whether a proposed development is providing enough parking.
Well, in order to approve a project, the municipal code sets out what is called findings, the reasons for approving the project. And the Planning Commission reasons for approving a project are generally fairly broad. They do include to a certain degree aesthetics and architecture, but not to the level of detail that the Architectural Board of Review or the Historic Landmarks Commission does. But findings such as neighborhood compatibility, appropriate size, bulk, and scale, being aesthetically enhancing for the community, those are findings that are made.
So there's both the actual projects themselves that come through. There's thresholds for the ones that we're to see, and then in fact we're looking at the direction of the movement of the city forward.
To see the handiwork of the Planning Commission, you don't have to look far. In fact, nearly every block in the city has a project that came before the Planning Commission in the last 50 years.
We had a city that ultimately ended up acquiring a lot of territory in its perimeter, so we did pretty well trying to zone those areas properly to sustain the city as we thought should be a city.
Other major projects such as the waterfront park project along Cabrillo Boulevard and the Doubletree Hotel, those projects were approved by Planning Commission. Projects at the zoo have been approved by the Planning Commission. The Cottage Hospital project, obviously one of the biggest projects in the community.
There's an occupational hazard with being on the Planning Commission, and that is that you get a sense of ownership of things that you've had a little hand in through the development review process and all of that. And you're right. I mean, I'm a great bore when I'm driving around town with my friends because I try to restrain myself, but I want to point out all the things I was involved in because there were a lot, you know.
Planning commissioners are appointed by the City Council and serve 4-year terms. The only qualification required to hold one of the 7 positions is to be a registered elector of the city. However, these former commissioners have a number of other suggestions.
You need to read the material and you need to ask a lot of questions. If you're curious and prepared, you can be a good planning commissioner irrespective of what your training was.
Someone willing to compromise on certain issues. Someone willing to be very respectful of the staff and fellow commissioners, and above all, a great love for Santa Barbara.
Well, you have to study a lot, and you have to try to be as fair as you can for everybody, including the petitioner, as well as the city. You have to think about the city all the time and what the city's growing into.
Even with all that homework, those that have previously volunteered to be planning commissioners say there are a few more rewarding ways to participate in and contribute to your community.
I loved every minute of it. I mean, it was like hours of boredom and moments of terror, but you know, we did it. We worked together. We argued, but we were friendly, I think, and generally the people got along well with each other, and they got along well with the public, and I think we made a difference.
What an honor, what a privilege, you know, and I think I share that with everyone who's been on the Planning Commission. I cannot imagine somebody having that opportunity and not going away feeling like, wow, what a life-fulfilling opportunity to serve like that.